Hello and welcome once again to Strong at Home. This is Dr. Brenda Murphy. I'm an educational psychologist with Sail Away Learning and Academy, and we are here today, as every day, to help you find ways to make your home life stronger, more productive, and more pleasant for you and all of those that live with you. So, what we're going to do today is we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Kathy Greenberg. Hello, Dr. Greenberg. How are you today? We're so glad that you're here. We've been so excited to learn that there are ways that we can help our students and our family, children, adults, learn in different ways, that we can actually use our brain for thinking. And the ways that we can do that are very much in line with a theory that you have been developing for many years, that we've been reviewing, that we talk about as MetaStrategic Knowledge. And so maybe just we'll review this really quickly as we're going into a very special topic today that we're going to talk about, the building blocks of thinking. So if you'll review just quickly with us the MetaStrategic Knowledge, that big old word that just has really a powerful impact, that it is an ability, and how do we access that ability? What is it that we are going to use when we activate MetaStrategic knowledge?
We're going to activate, and I should say my work is based on the theories of Reuven Feuerstein, particularly his theory of mediated learning experience, but also structural cognitive modifiability. And from that, I've developed an approach called Cognitive Enrichment Advantage, and really focused in on how to work with learners in understanding metastrategic knowledge. So we're focused on thinking about your thinking in a strategic way. So it's meta-strategic rather than just meta cognitive approaches. So you're really developing a repertoire of building blocks of thinking and tools of learning that you can draw on, that when you need them, to turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. So there are the two aspects. There's the thinking, but there's also the tools for understanding feelings and motivating your own behavior. And those are just as important as the thinking ones. So often with learning strategies, we just focus on the thinking and we don't focus on what can we do to improve our feeling of competence, for example, when we're struggling in some subject matter.
Yeah, and I want to go back just 1 second, because you've mentioned that your work is based on the theories of Reuven Feuerstein, which is mediated learning. And if you could maybe unpack that term for us just a little bit before we get into the CEA material specifically and approaches the building blocks of thinking that we're going to be covering here today.
Mediated learning experience theory has to do with how in the world, in all kinds of cultures, do we develop human competence for getting along within our own cultural setting and societal setting. And that comes through those that care for us feeling a need to transmit the culture. So that results in our learning how to learn successfully given our environment and our situation. But school might be coming from a very different culture, and a different culture than almost anyone's own. There's a whole culture around how schooling is done.
Yes, it is.
Sometimes done in different ways by different teachers, but nevertheless, there is a culture about it. And if we understand and can deal with what goes underneath at a micro level, we can very much improve our ability to learn. But it also applies even when we're in our own personal world view of our family. We still can benefit from thinking about our thinking, feeling, and motivation in a way that we can be more effective in our own personal family.
Right. And that way that we can actually have control over the ways that we think. So that leads us into the building blocks of thinking, which are ways in which we can actively and intentionally interact with what our brain is doing. In other words, we have control over it, not the other way around.
Right. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Is we're really seeing what is it that's going on, especially when we're learning something. What is it that's actually happening in that thinking? Some people call that cognitive processes, and there's been a lot of research done on what those are. And then there have been people who have developed strategies for how to help people do better with those cognitive processes. What I love about Feuerstein's work and then integrated into CEA is that it really depends upon what is most meaningful to the learner. So to give out an expert strategy is probably not going to be nearly as effective as helping a person to understand these cognitive processes or building blocks of thinking and be able to come up with their own strategies based on that. So you can see 3 parts there. There's approaching a learning experience. There are 3 building blocks under approaching. There's making meaning of a learning experience. There are 5 building blocks for making meaning. And there's confirming, or we might say in school, checking your work. And there are 4 building blocks that have to do with confirming the learning experience and what is happening as you think about whatever it is you're trying to do in a school setting.
You know, when I see this, Kathy, it reminds me in some ways of quality control, that that we make sure that there's like a checklist, and this is not exactly a checklist. This is a series of things, and that these specific building blocks are like things that we can check and say, I can pull this off of the shelf when I need it, in order to think about different parts of the learning. And I think that for me, it's always been instructive to realize that I'm not going to just jump right into the thinking task. I'm not just jump into what I'm doing. And that's impulsivity. And we talked about attention before, and impulsivity is a huge part of attention deficit disorders. And so what I love about this meta-strategic approach is that it is helping us to understand that there's never a need to just jump into something, but it's important that we approach it first, that we look at it from one perspective. And that gives us the permission to stop and take a breath, and I'm going to use the term think about it before we move ahead with the actual activity. And then in the midst of the activity, there are ways to make meaning from what we're doing. And then when we're finished, have we done it the way that we want to have done it? For example, for me, I think about that is the mirror beside the door. When you're getting ready to go out for the day, do you have your hat on? Or if in older days, women would put their hats on. Is my hair in place? Do I have my coat? It's like, I'm ready to go now. And so I think that these 3 aspects, it's really important, if families pull nothing else from our 15 minutes here today about the building blocks of thinking, that those building blocks are divided into 3 separate areas that help us control ourselves and our situation.
Yes. And it's important to realize that anyone's use of these building blocks is based on 4 parameters. First of all, the degree of challenge. When a child, let's say in school, is not having any trouble with a particular assignment, there's no need to really focus in and make a strategy to overcome a challenge, because it's not a challenge. It may be boring, but there isn't a need for an explicit plan of how to use a strategy. There also has to be an awareness of need. if you're not aware of what your problem is, you're not paying attention to confirming it in your quality control with what was actually asked of you in the assignment, then there's no need for a strategy there either. You have to become aware of that need. You also have to understand and use that specific building block or tool. You have to know what all the different facets are and how many different directions you can go in. And then you've got to have a repertoire of MetaStrategic knowledge, because what is needed by one learner is not necessarily going to be needed by another learner. So all of this has to come together. And with the approaching the learning experience, you don't just systematically explore and then make a plan and then express your plan in an effective way. You constantly go back and forth. You may end up having to do more planning and go back and do more exploring to make that plan more effective as you begin to get into it. And then you may start expressing your thoughts and actions and find that you really do need to make another change.
Yeah, that is so important. That one of the things that I like about this as well is that these various aspect here in approaching is it gives you permission sometime to take your time and to be thorough about what you're doing. And it reminds us the importance of these metastrategic pieces of information that are going to guide us to have a successful outcome, no matter what it is that we are looking at. That's there. Like you said, you don't have to use all of them, but you can just use some of them. And let me get I wanted to get our thing here about, here are some of the approaching the learning experience. I'm sorry, I think I've got that out of order. I apologize. Let me get back and get the right slide up there for us to talk about, because I wanted to go to the
making meaning.
Yes, and I know I have it here somewhere. Where is it? Just a minute. I rearranged all of these right before we went on, and sometimes that happens. I'll tell you what. Let me find that right one and go into, if y'all will bear with me with the technology just a moment, that that I had here, and I will find this. So hold on just a minute. PowerPoint. How am I? Just a second. They never want to cooperate with you when you need them to. Let me get up here. While I am searching for the appropriate one, if you would not mind continuing on, just talking a little bit about how these building blocks of thinking will impact our children. And I'm going to find each of those for us. I'll tell you what, let me go back here just a minute, and I will, let me get to this slide, and we can talk some more about that, where I find, if we can just go through those. And I'm going to try, we found the slide for approaching, and I want to find the slide that builds out the making meaning a little bit more completely. So if you will share with our viewers about a little bit more about making meaning in the learning environment as a building block of thinking, I will get this technology and get the right slide for us.
Okay. With making meaning, we're talking about what is significant within the given experience. What is it with this task that can help me to get inside of it? Because it's more than just approaching it with how I explore and gather information or make a plan or express myself. It's also just, what does it mean? So there's working memory, which is what's going on when you're actively thinking. But with working memory, you've got to know how to get some distracting thoughts out of the way so that you can focus in on what it is you're trying to do instead of what you're going to do after school, whenever it might be. But it's a matter of being sure that with your that you're also retrieving from memory what it is that you would like to or is necessary in order to be able to do the task, whether it be how to make a plan better. It might have to apply to your plan, or it might just be with what is it that is really going on here? How do I make comparisons? We do that automatically all the time, but it is very important to be able to be sure you're doing it when you're in a challenging situation, because then that can break down. We don't think back to and connect events to other things we've done before that helped us be successful that just might be very effective here. Or what does this social studies lesson or lesson about the history of Tennessee have to do with being connected to the history of the United States, so that we have a much clearer understanding of how it all goes together and what impacted what as we were learning. Have I gotten the main idea? It's so important and so easily missed. It's like anytime you laugh at a joke, you got the main idea. If you didn't get the joke, then you didn't get the main idea of whoever developed that particular bit of humor.
Yeah, and it's really difficult. And I want to apologize. I've not been able to pull that other PowerPoint up that gives each of those. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to stop this particular segment, and we will redo part of this and expand on the rest of it. So I'm going to end the broadcast right here, and we will continue with the building blocks of thinking with the appropriate resources so that you can see them on the screen that will give you a better understanding of what we're talking about. So thank you, and we will be right back.
You want me to stay in the studio?